At this time, I'd like to welcome Chair Bailey to the podium to begin the presentation for the state of Georgia.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hear I'm the last one in between dinner or a drink. So that's good. Appreciate that planning. No, I'm happy to be here. My name is Charlie Bailey, and I'm proud to be the chairman of the Democratic Party of the great state of Georgia. Let me just say, everything I'm about to say, let me give the caveat. Everything I'm about to say about our wonderful state has got nothing to do with and no comment on all the great attributes of all the wonderful states that make up the DNC, not the least of which some of my brothers and sisters that are chairs of the state supplying are in here as well. I appreciate y'all's time today. I want to shout out my friend Wendy Davis, who is on this committee. Where'd she go? Oh, she's right there. Wendy, who's been teaching me about politics for over 20 years now, when she met me as a young Democrat, and I'm proud to have her as a mentor and a friend. And also, congratulations for helping manage Keisha Lance Bottom's race and strong nomination to be our next governor. All right. So I'll just say here, the thing that Georgia, if you take nothing else away from what we offer as being an early state, it is that the twin objectives of having a diverse electorate and being a battleground state. Some of our brothers and sisters can do one, some can do the other, and we can do both. And I would say no state better fits the stated goals that the DNC has for competitiveness, diversity, the accessibility that our infrastructure provides, and our nationally recognized voter protection department has already proven its ability to guarantee fair, transparent, and inclusive elections. Our coalition is already diverse, and it is growing. We are on track to be a majority-minority state here soon. We probably actually already are. We just don't have a census to prove it. And in the South, Georgia has the second highest percentage of non-white population of all the southern states, at 48% already. Again, it's probably already over that. That's at last census. We also have the third highest union representation in our electorate of all southern states. We are diverse not just racially and ethnically, but we are diverse geographically. Some of my friends that are not from Georgia think it's Atlanta and then everywhere else. Now, I'm from rural West Georgia, grew up on a cattle farm there. Yeah, we've got Atlanta, one of the vibrant, biggest and growing cities in the country. But if you look at how we actually break out in terms of our population, this provides candidates a lot of different ways to campaign. We've got what we call kind of core Atlanta. That's 19% of the population. We've got suburbs and exurbs. It's another 37%. We've got our hub cities. It's 14%. Think of, if you've heard of Savannah, Columbus, Augusta, Macon, Albany, places like that. And then we've got a really big rural population. 21% of our population is rural. Agriculture is still our number one industry, even with all the Fortune 500 companies that we have. A fourth of, and people also mistake this, they think sometimes that our rural population that just means white. Nah, not the South, and certainly not in Georgia. A fourth of our rural registered voters are minorities, and a fifth of rural registered voters in Georgia are black. We have these caucuses that reflect our diversity. These are resources to presidential candidates that reflect the entire state of Georgia and our entire electorate. This infrastructure is built out and will be ready for any candidates that come to campaign. And I don't need to tell anybody here the importance of that kind of work for not just winning the nomination, but ultimately winning the presidency, which is obviously the whole point of the project. When we don't just have people in these, coalitions and committees and that kind of thing, they use tailored community outreach. We have in-language voting resources, literature, phone banks, and including our voter protection hotline operators, and I'll talk a little bit more about voter protection program in just a bit. And we make regularly investment in both earned and paid media, including in-language and bilingual social media ads. We just brought on a new digital director who is bilingual in Spanish, and she's focusing on this already. Did that in the primaries that we just had last week. If you win Georgia, you win the country, simply put. We are the ultimate battleground. And we have 2 senators, obviously, to prove it. But it's not the only measure by which you see our growing status. In our state house, just from the 10 years from 2016 to 2026, we grew from 60 seats to 81 seats. We are now 10 seats from an outright majority, 9 seats in the state house from a dead tie. 5 of those seats, y'all, 5 of them were won by the vice president, by VP Harris. This is how close, and these are with gerrymandered maps. In the state Senate, we grew from 18 to 23 seats. Obviously, we went from 0 United States senators to, if you ask me, the 2 best United States senators in the country, and my friends John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock. We went from 0 statewide elected officials to 2 public service commissioners, statewide elected non-federal officials, to 2 public service commissioners just last year who won by 26-point margins. Grew from 4 seats to 5 in the congressional delegation in spite of gerrymandering. And then obviously we sent our electoral votes for Joe Biden in 2020 and had the highest raw Democratic vote gain of any state from 2020 to 2024 in spite of the headwinds that we had in our country in that election. Here's another way to think about our growing competitiveness. 2018, the national environment, y'all know this, was about 8.6 in our favor, D plus 8.6. At the top of the ticket, we lost by 1.4. And me, I had a lot more hair then, and I didn't have the beard. I was a 35-year-old, never run for anything. I was our attorney general nominee, and I almost won against an incumbent. That tells you how good the environment was. But that's still a 10-point delta from the national environment to what we had in Georgia. Fast forward to 2024. Nationally, Donald Trump wins by 1.5. In Georgia, he wins by 2.2. That delta is 0.7%. In the intervening 6 and now 8 years, we have moved much closer to where the median of the country is. That's why we say we are the ultimate battleground and heading in the right direction. This is another way to visualize this. Y'all probably seen one of these maps. If you look across the state, this is the 2024 election in the shifts. You can see where there wasn't much blue. You see where a lot of it is concentrated there. It's in Georgia. There were, if we go back, 4 of the 10 largest counties with the largest swings nationally, 4 of the 10 were located in Georgia. And when you look, it's around Metro Atlanta where you see, again, against these headwinds, you see this growth that we have. This is another way to visualize it. We had 23 counties that shifted Democratic from 2020 to 2024. Now look at this. This is the population change, and I'm going to flip back. The darker green is the increase, okay? See where it is? It's where we're swinging. We're growing where we are swinging. That shows how competitive we are and are going to be in the future. In the public service, this is a better map. How about I like this one a lot more. In the PSC election, so the same night that the Virginia governor's race and New Jersey governor's race were decided, we elected those 2 PSC commissioners. That's like our state utility board. And in 157 of the 159 county, our brothers and sisters in Texas are the only state that have more counties than we do. There's a funny story about why we have so many. But 157 of the 159 shifted left. I love this one too. These are the counties who won. This is the first time since 1998 that there were blue counties, a contiguous line connecting the Alabama border to the South Carolina border. This was not just a growth in the cities. This was across the state. And we did that with messaging about people's pocketbooks, about what Republican rule and 23 years of it had wrought for their families. People run on that kind of message in 2028, we will win the presidency, and we've shown the pathway how you can do that in Georgia. Now look at the primary we just had. So on the left, you'll see that's the 2022 primary and the percentage of those voters that voted in our primary versus the Republicans. So 95% of black voters, 47% Hispanic voters, 44. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. Now look at the shift in the primary we just had last week. And this, let me just say this. All right. They had two competitive top-of-the-ticket races, governor and U.S. Senate. And in that governor's race, they spent $100 million beating the fool out of each other. We had a governor's race, but we did not have a Senate race, obviously a primary, because John already was unopposed in the primary. Our people combined in the governor's race spent probably $4.5 million. They spent another $15 million in the U.S. Senate race. By all, like, the way politics is supposed to work and what all y'all know, we should not have had any gains here. We had an 8-point, if you look, all voters, we outballoted them 54% to 46%, an 8-point margin. You have to go back, I said 1998. You have to go back to 1998, the last time we had a midterm primary margin like that. We should not have even won the ballot margin with that kind of disparity and spin in the two top of the ticket. Not only did we win, it was the highest in a generation. And when you see, look at the Hispanic voters. Went from 47% to 72% of Hispanic voters pulling a Democratic ballot. 44% of AAPI voters to 63. White voters 14 to 25. We not only grew our margin, or just our raw, sorry, not our margin, we grew our raw votes 48%. So 2022, the number of people picking a Democratic ballot to 2026. 48% increase. Not only that, Republicans had a raw vote drop. Now think about that. A raw vote drop of 23%. We're 4 years later, population growth, because we're growing, and they've got the most expensive races at the top of the ticket ever, and they're so disillusioned, and we have so much momentum that they dropped. That is the kind of momentum that we have that we're building on to win in November and lay the groundwork for all of our great candidates to run in primaries and prove to our voters, they don't have to wait to the general election. They start proving to our voters in that primary that they understand their lives and that they're going to fight for them. We've talked about some of this. You get the broad coalition of voters. We have demonstrated a commitment to the voters who make up the foundation of our party and are key to success, as well as being that true battleground state. We also have a strong infrastructure that'll aid candidates in campaigning. As y'all well know, 75% of the delegates at state level are chosen actually by congressional district. With our geographic diversity, what this enables candidates to do is they don't just have to park in Atlanta and campaign there. They can, but there could be candidates with all different ways of thinking about an electorate and what they can get in an early state, and getting delegates is very important. We got a lot of different ways for them to campaign and get delegates. You've got, of our 14 congressional districts, you've got 4 that you would call are core Atlanta or inner suburb. You've got another 4 that are suburban and exurban. You got 4 that are mostly rural but have an anchor in one of our hub cities, Augusta or Columbus or Macon or Savannah. And then you've got another 2 that are just purely rural. So that kind of diversity aids our candidates in making their case and getting delegates early. We have famed busiest airport in the world and all that, but we have 109 public airports where people can get around very quickly. 15 interstate highways, 6 main media markets. We do have others that feed Chattanooga, Greenville, Jacksonville, and Tallahassee, but we have pretty good coverage in our state, our 6 media markets, which makes it more cost effective for people and candidates to communicate. We've got this grassroots infrastructure, 14 congressional district chairs, county committees in over 130 of our counties, our executive committee. Probably all the states have something like this, right? They've got their state committees and all that kind of thing. But we're organized from the top all the way down through the county level, and we provide tools like Vote Builder, Mobilize, targeted texting. So our counties are equipped to be tools and assets for candidates as they campaign. Ballot access, and I know this is there have been some questions on this. Let me be clear. We have a clear, standardized, predictable process. The presidential campaigns, they request to our executive committee to be placed on the ballot. We, and those candidates, must meet y'all's, the DNC rules and call for the Democratic National Convention. They have to meet that. And we don't have any filing fees. We don't have any petition requirements for us or the state of Georgia. So it's clean, it's easy, it's fair across the board, and we use the nationally standardized rules that y'all come up with. That's it. We're not going to be picking and choosing or anything like that. We're just going to use the rules y'all give us. Our voter protection team, let me brag a little bit, and I should have said I've got a couple of staff here. Deputy Executive Director Justin Pitts. Justin, if you raise your hand. And Communications Director Ellie Schwartz. And then also Cecilia Ugarte Baldwin, who is our voter protection director. She leads our the best voter protection team in the country, I'd say. We had the first full-time voter protection director. We have a hotline available in multiple languages, statewide monitoring team, including county liaisons in most of our counties, as well as legal support. We have extensive voter education efforts. We had, when I became chair a year ago, we had 2 people already in an early and an off year on staff. That grew to 5 by the fall for the Public Service Commission, and now between us and the coordinated campaign, we have 6. So we know how to do voter protection in Georgia. We're used to the Republican efforts, shall we say, to restrict the vote. And another thing that's not on here that we have is in our legislative sessions, we are primarily the ones providing the legislators on our side with the tools they need to combat the Republican attempts at voter suppression. And in the last 2 years, even though they've tried both times, in the last 2 years, they have not gotten through any voter suppression legislation in the state of Georgia, and that is because of the education efforts of our voter protection team.
Chair Bailey, thank you for a great presentation. Yes. And welcome to your staff. The time has expired for presentation, but we now have plenty of time for questions and answers. We'll start with Secretary Ray.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the presentation.
Yes, sir.
A question for you. So last cycle, as this body went through this process to develop the calendar, Georgia was one of the states that we elected to move forward into that pre-window. And I know we tried to get that date changed, and we're unable to actually move Georgia up. So as we try to build the calendar this cycle and go through this process and build that calendar that tells the story of our party, what can be done, what will the Georgia Democratic Party do to ensure that we can move the primary date actually into the pre-window if we were to select that?
Yeah. Excellent question, Mr. Secretary. And if I hadn't been so loquacious, I would have gotten to this before I finished the presentation. This is going to go one of 3 ways, all right? Either we're going to win Secretary of State this November. And I would say that's a coin flip proposition. It's an open race. Y'all see the ballot advantage we had. We got John at the top of the ticket. We've got Keisha as a gubernatorial nominee. Coin flip chance, we win that. We win that, we got it. No problem. The Secretary of State is in Georgia who determines. Option number 2, a Republican wins. We don't want that to happen. But a Republican wins, and they judge that it is in their interest, and they ain't going to do a damn thing for me, or for the party or anything like that. They will judge that it is in their interest to move forward in the calendar because in an open presidential primary on their side, they want to wield influence and they want their people. And this has precedent in Georgia. Brian Kemp did this when he was Secretary of State. He moved us up in the process, again, not to do any favors to the Democrats, but because he wanted it. And that could very well come to pass. They could want that. Option 3, there's a Republican Secretary of State. They don't want to do that. For whatever reason, their own, and far be it from me to get in their heads, but for their own reasons, they don't want to do that. And I would just say, in that hypothetical that y'all in your all due wisdom have selected Georgia as one of the early states, then unselect us. And one thing I'll tell you you won't have shortages of great states that want to do it. Those are unknowns, and there's not a person on the planet that can tell you which of those 3 it's going to be. We will make the case, and in the worst case scenario, it's number 3. Y'all move on to somebody else. It ain't going to hurt our feelings. I mean, y'all can't control it, and I can't control it. And let me also say this. We will happily be the number 1 state. But we're not sitting up here saying, let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and that we're one or nothing, right? Y'all slot us in where you need to. I think it might be time for 2 southern states. So, nod to Crystal in the room. I'm just kidding. I'm not picking favorites. We can cross that bridge when it comes, but it'll play out one of those 3 ways.
All right, thank you. Susan Swecker.
Hi, Susan from Virginia. I'm intrigued about how you file your requirements. So if you have a candidate that files, do they file with you, when you say they file with you all at the party? And then if somebody comes and wants to run maybe for not good motives, do you have the ability to say yes or no? I mean, are you the decider that then gets forwarded to the Secretary of State? Or how do you prevent, like in Virginia 4 years ago, we had Kanye West, filed and then got knocked off because he didn't have enough signatures. So how do you decide that the person is really a Democrat?
Technically, yes, the power rests with us. The Secretary of State is going to take what we give them. So yes, when I say we, the executive committee specifically of the State Democratic Party. But like I said, we plan on using the standards that y'all put forward. And I would imagine those standards wouldn't allow somebody like Kanye West to get on. But yes, technically we can just say no. And the Secretary of State will do what we tell him, whoever we give him.
Okay. All right, Frank.
Frank Leon, D.C. Just clarified, as Jason said, last time we granted a waiver and then we gave Georgia at least 1 extension and maybe 2 extensions to try to get it done. Never happened. Am I correct in understanding that there's no way that the primary could be moved up prior to a new Secretary of State taking office? And secondly, do you have any indication that the Republicans would go ahead and move the primary up even though they would lose a significant number of their delegates under the RNC rules if they did so after this August?
I mean, I think technically the Secretary of State could say, like the current Secretary of State could say, hey, we're doing it on X date. Democrats want to do it, and I think the Republicans should too, and we're doing it. But whoever gets elected Secretary of State could just reverse it. So ultimately, you're still dealing with a new Secretary of State making that call. And there's no way to these guys right now. So we've got a primary on our side for Secretary of State, but so do they. They are locked in this combat for the next 3 weeks. They are absolutely ripping each other up one side and down the other. I couldn't even tell you which one's going to win it. And certainly any overture that we would bring to them now, it would probably be used against them that we even reached out to them. So we won't know we just can't know right now. I think there's probably one of the guys, this is just my gut and what I know about politics and these 2 politicians. One of the guys might be more amenable to it, Tim Fleming. He's seen as the more establishment type. The other one is Vernon Jones, who y'all may have heard the name, may have seen him around, Big MAGA. guy used to be a Democrat, switched parties in Big MAGA. So, but even Vernon loves the spotlight. So even as I say that, Vernon loves the spotlight. So again, for his own, purposes, he may be like, oh yeah. And for them dealing with the RNC, of course, that'll be for them. We don't even know, is Don Jr. going to be running for president? Like, we don't know what the RNC is going to be thinking about things either. They will make that argument to the RNC, probably similar to this case I'm making, of like, hey, we want to win in the general, let's move up and give our people a shot at these same voters. So they'd make that same argument or something, whatever arguments they make to Republicans make to each other, and they will either succeed or they won't. But again, I don't, nobody, I don't think that's not an answer we can have at this point. But I would just say again, if it comes to pass, worst case scenario, yeah, unselect us.
When does the new Secretary of State take office?
January. I don't know who
Not
that's
until January.
Yeah, January.
So until then, it's Brad and Raffensperger.
Until then, it's Raffensperger. Now, there's probably a time period there, like let's say the Republican does win in November. In between, could have a conversation, and even though they're not the Secretary of State yet, we could go ahead and have that conversation and get a commitment. But they actually take office in January, and it's Raffensperger until then.
Okay. All right. Jane?
Thank you, and thank you, Chair, for everything that you are doing for your party. Your election protection program is the envy of all of our state parties. It's very strong. I have a question on voter reg. So talk to us about how people register to vote in your state so we can know that. And then talk us through a little bit on how you would see, if you were one of the first early states, how it would help build your party's infrastructure statewide to help down ballot candidates.
So we don't have party registration in Georgia. You just register to vote. And then when it comes time for the primary, you choose, do you want to pick up a Democratic ballot or a Republican ballot? And you can go back and forth. And I would say that's a strength for our candidates because they get to make an argument not just to our base, but to independent voters who can and do in our state swing back and forth. And once you get somebody to vote in our primary, it is far more likely they will vote for us or our candidate come the general. So I think it's that we have that open system is a real strength for us as a growing party in our state. And then, what it'll provide for us if we're an early state is, we've got great county committees, and we talked about all this infrastructure that we have, but having those campaigns starting in 2027, all of our people that might work on a campaign or just facilitate the campaigns moving around and campaigning around the state will gain that experience. Now, maybe they already have experience in governor's races and state house and all the rest, but you're leveling up the staff and the consultant class and activist class in our state to be ready and even better equipped come the general election when we all are rowing in the same direction for one candidate.
Thank you. Steph?
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Chair. Stephanie Campagna-Wheaton from New Jersey. I've asked every state this, but can you tell me, I actually have two questions. Can you tell me the average cost of 1 month's rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Atlanta?
In Atlanta, it's probably, there's great diversity among our neighborhoods and everything, whether you're talking about the suburbs, but you're probably talking $1,300, $1,400, somewhere in there, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on if you're closer in town, probably going to be a little more, outside a little bit less. But if you're talking about some of these hub cities, which again, with our congressional districts people are campaigning in, it's a good bit less, probably more like $1,000 a month. And then if you're in one of our smaller towns and rural areas, it's going to be even less than that.
Thank you. My second question is, can you please speak on any restrictions to abortion there are in your state?
Yeah, quite a few. We have one of the most restrictive abortion bans in the country, a 6-week ban. And when we elect Keisha Lance Bottoms this year and make gains in legislature. It's a top priority to get that thing done away with and go back to basically a row standard in our state, which we had for years. But it is the law now, and it's something we have to deal with, our families and our neighbors and folks in our community. It's a horrible thing. It has resulted in people dying that should be with us here today. But we do have strong relationships with partners such as Planned Parenthood and others that can provide the best advice and some services to people, even if that means getting them out of state and getting the care they need. But that is the current state of the law.
All right, Donna?
I had multiple questions because this is the first state that clearly comes under the jurisdiction of the Voting Rights Act, or what was formerly the Voting Rights Act, and the impact it will have on your state, given the fact that your governor initially said, no, we're not going to, redraw the districts, and now there are at least conversations of redrawing the districts. So my questions, of course, has to do with the DOJ is already taking your ballots in Fulton County. What's the status of getting those ballots back? Any other compromises with the DOJ or the Department of Homeland Security on your voter infrastructure in the state? Number two, of course, cybersecurity. I'm glad you have a robust voter protection program, but does that include cybersecurity as well? Number three, in terms of the Voting Rights Act, I know you all have tried to pass SB 5, I think it's 536, the Henry McNeil Voting Rights Act. Is that still going forward? Is that something that the Democratic lawmakers are still working on? And lastly, I guess this is one that, I think about Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss and election workers, and what steps, if any, will you all take to help protect Democratic election work or election workers across the board? One little fact for those of you, and of course, Stephanie, I wasn't born in 1870 when the 15th Amendment passed, but my grandmother was, and my grandfather. And while my grandfather had the right to vote, as you well know, because of Jim Crow laws, they could not vote until 1965. My grandmother did live long enough to get her right to vote in her 80s, but Georgia was the first state to enact the poll tax, followed by the literacy tax, the grandfather clause, and the understanding clause, and so much more. Georgia has a dubious record. I'm going to ask all the southern states as a Louisianian by birth. But what steps are you all taking now to protect the voting infrastructure and the rights of citizens, eligible citizens in the state of Georgia to vote, given the threat that you are under with the dilution of the Voting Rights Act?
So the first question about the Fulton County ballots is currently in litigation. Federal judge recently ruled that because Fulton County had copies, they had been given copies of what was taken, that they did not need the actual ballots themselves back. So that's the specific answer to that question. There's been there's challenges to the search warrant and all that kind of thing. But that's where that sits right now, and I'm not aware of any further action other than they've got the ballots. We have quite a rogue state election board that has some powers. They don't have power to make law, and I was actually a pro bono lawyer in 2024 that helped to establish with our appellate courts that they can't make law. Y'all might have remembered in 2024 towards the end, they were trying to pass different rules about hand counting ballots and all that. We defeated that in our appellate courts. That's before I was chair. So, but I would not be surprised if they try to use something about whatever they think about some conspiracy theory, which is the basis of the affidavit that they presented in order to get the search warrant, was just a rehashing of these nutty conspiracy theories. Wouldn't surprise me if the nutty state election board tried to use some of those as a basis to take over elections, but we have a really good team of lawyers, both with the party, with Senator Ossoff's campaign, that are working and we will be ready for anything like that, and they will spare no cost to litigate, to protect also our county's ability to administrate their elections, which under the Georgia Constitution they are afforded. Number two, now I talked so long like a lawyer, I can't remember. Number two, you want to tell me what number two was?
I was mentioning cybersecurity
Yeah.
and the protection of your election infrastructure.
Yep. As far as the party's cybersecurity goes, it's actually something we're trying to improve, and that is currently in process. We're actually looking at a couple of proposals right now. As far as the state's voting process, we have confidence in the protections that are there, and it's been, even though attacked by Republicans over these, ever since Trump decided. Well, frankly, as we've been honest about it, a bunch of black people in Georgia could not have voted enough to vote his sorry butt out. And since he made that choice and started attacking, we've been able to withstand those in subsequent elections and have had free and fair elections in Georgia. So I'm confident in our system. Question about protection of election workers is is one that is not academic to us. We've experienced and we've seen it both in Ruby Freeman and in the case of Shay Moss, and what they were made to go through. Our robust voter protection program, the reason we have that county liaison program that I mentioned, which is in the vast majority of our counties, is to have that support, not just when it comes time for the election itself, but throughout the year, so people have someone to call, they have someone to fall back on. And we have, as recently as within the last 3 months, paid for legal protection for folks that have been gone after by the state election board. People are just election workers. So it is not something I grew up in the church. Words without deeds, well, they are dead. And so we continually carry out the deeds to protect our election workers, and it's an article of faith in Georgia, and we'll be at the party as long as I'm chair. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for your answers. And one last one.
Yes, ma'am.
500,000 people are reported to be purged. Are you following those developments?
Yes, we have. Now, there's some overstating of that. That number, and I believe, Cecilia will correct me, was it 150 in the initial before you take out the ones that were the ALEC system? Okay. So what were the ones that were actually purged? It was like, the total number was like 150,000, but that wasn't like a lot of those were actually people that had moved out. We use that, is it Alan? What is it? Eric. some guy's name. The Eric system that tracks registrations in other states and that kind of thing. So most of those were actually legitimate. They had moved away, or they had died. The remaining, I'm going to keep looking back at her. The remaining about 40,000, we reached out starting last year via text message and a phone banking program that our volunteers did, and we contacted every single one of those people. We weren't able to re-register all of them, but I think we re-registered somewhere in like 10 or 12% of the ones we could reach. So that's how we addressed that when it happened. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Keith Umamoto?
Yes, Keith Umamoto of California. One of the things that, since we're part of the Democratic Party, what we want is to maximize party infrastructure and operations. At the same time, we also understand the distinction that some quasi-party, nonpartisan, sometimes activities are done outside the party infrastructure. We heard a lot about, in 2020, Fair Fight is a prime example, which worked as its own independent nonprofit. To what degree was learned from those operations that were folded into the Georgia Democratic Party operations that we can, obviously, and how do you project out in the 2028 election other advancements on some of the tools and what we've learned from those kind of activities from the nonprofits?
So we have a close relationship with a number of our groups Fair Fight being one of them, and regular contact with Lauren and them over there. And I know them well from my runs. I was on a statewide ballot with Stacy twice, and so we were, obviously, you alluded to the fact there's some things we can't coordinate on, there's some things we can. And they're not the only organization that works, though they certainly do a lot of work still around voter protection in our state. And what we've developed is, here's an example. Brian Kemp has said, the governor has said after, I think Donna said this, now they weren't going to redistrict for 2026, not even going to come into session until after the election. Now we're coming back the day after the runoff, which is about 3 weeks from today. Not for this year, but for 2028. So in that effort, we are coordinating with a number of the groups, because it's not about an election, right? It's not about it's not vote for so-and-so or whatever. It's about, first, if we can defeat this, like our brothers and sisters in South Carolina did, if we can defeat this in the legislature, in the General Assembly, that's the first priority. And then if not, that we have the right legal strategy going forward. So, you know, some of the groups they can't do some things as effectively as we can, but they can also raise money that we're not going to get. And so we have a good system in Georgia, and we're always, you know, we're trying to get better at it and everything. Of we do the things that we do best, and they can do the things that they do best. I don't know if that answered your question, but we have those relationships, and I would say as a party, we are benefited by some of the groups that operate in that voter protection world in our state.
Thank you. Coleman Eldridge.
Thank you, Co-Chair. And thank you, Mr. Chair. Coleman Eldridge from Kentucky, so a fellow Southerner.
Yes,
and you mentioned something earlier, or maybe I read it, you know, faith-based outreach in the South. It's important everywhere, but it kind of hits different sometimes in our neck of the woods. And so I guess my question is, what I think I saw was that that outreach happens mainly during election cycles. Now, is that correct?
No, I wouldn't say everything ramps up.
Okay.
In the election across the board.
Okay.
But we have those relationships. For instance, we have representatives of the faith community on the executive committee, which is our, you know, smaller one. It's like 35 people or something like that, and then as well as many on the state committee. So members of the faith community, ministers and others, rabbis, are already part of our structure as a year-round process of keeping up those relationships and communication and everything. But like everything, as we go into an election year, that increases. But I don't know if I would say mainly, but it does increase in the election year.
You answered the question. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate it.
Thank you all very much.